The United States of America was known by immigrants as the land of the free and a place of opportunity. It is ideas like this that drew Takeo Ozawa to immigrate to the United States from Japan. Takeo Ozawa was born in Japan in 1875 and came to the United States in search of a higher quality of life and an American education in 1894. He was inspired by American lifestyle and embraced it, shunning away his Japanese culture. He was educated at the University of California in Berkeley and married a woman who too was educated through American schooling. Together they created an American family and settled in Hawaii. Ozawa thought himself an American patriot through and through and applied for naturalization in Hawaii in 1914, over 20 years after he had first immigrated to the United States. His application was denied, ruling that he was not considered white and thus not eligible under the naturalization laws. This angered Ozawa and pushed him to seek higher ruling through the United States Supreme Court in 1922. It is through the Supreme Court's ruling that the precedent was set for the undermining of Japanese immigrants who came to the United States, adding further tension to an already festering bias against the Japanese. Naturalization as a United States citizen was decided upon by the term set forth by the Naturalization Act of 1790. This act stated that any alien, being a free white person, who shall have resided within the limits and under the jurisdiction of the United States for the term of 2 years, may be admitted to become a citizen thereof on application to any common law court of recording in any one of the states wherein he shall have resided for the term of 1 year at least, and making proof to the satisfaction of such court that he is a person of good character, and taking the oath or affirmation prescribed by law to support the Constitution of the United States. Furthermore, the Act was improved in 1795 and set forth 4 guidelines. 1. That said candidate for naturalization renounce ties to their previous country and beliefs. 2. That the candidate has resided within the United States for at least 5 years, one being in the state in which he applied for naturalization. 3. That the candidate be in good moral standing in accordance with the United States Constitution. And 4. That the candidate renounce any titles that he may have previously held in his previous country. The key term in both of these acts was the phrase free white persons. The question of naturalization and whiteness brought forth by Ozawa would play a huge role in the overall treatment of Japanese immigrants in the U.S. The first real wave of Japanese immigration came in the 1880s to provide cheap labor to sugarcane fields of Hawaii. By the end of the 1900s, the Japanese began to lease and sharecrop American land. Around this time, Americans began to fear that the Chinese would overtake America, and the Chinese Exclusion Act prevented their immigration. Because of this, there was a higher demand for cheap labor in the West, and the Japanese were quick to More Japanese continued to migrate into the United States, and the American citizens began to fear an overtaking of Japanese population, just as they had the Chinese. Japanese immigrants would work for less money and do the jobs that most American citizens would not do in the West. In 1913, the California Land Law banned Japanese from purchasing land as they were not American citizens. This is just one way that Americans tried to put a lull to the expansion of Japanese in the U.S. Ozawa versus the United States was a pivotal test of bias created by American culture. If Ozawa were allowed to naturalize, this would open up the door to more Japanese naturalization, breaking down the caste system that the Americans had tried to create. Ozawa based his argument solely on the color of his skin and the patriotism displayed by his family. Ozawa stated to the courts that he was American based on his actions. He was educated in American schools, went to American churches, and raised his daughter to speak English and embrace the typical American lifestyle. He had renounced ties to his old country, Japan, just as the naturalization laws had requested, and was of good moral standing with the United States Constitution. He had lived over 20 years on American soil, embracing its culture through and through. As stated by the courts, he was well qualified by character and education for citizenship. Why, then, was he prevented in Hawaii from naturalization? It was his whiteness that was brought into question. Ozawa argued to the Supreme Courts that the color of his skin was noticeably white, in fact, even whiter than some races in the United States that were considered to be white. The United States Supreme Court examined Ozawa's statement and in the end disagreed with his definition of whiteness. The Supreme Court stated, manifestly, the test afforded by the mere skin of each individual is impractical, as that differs greatly among the persons of the same race. Even among Anglo-Saxons, ranging by imperceptible graduations from the fair blonde to the swarthy brunette, the later being darker than many of the lighter-hued persons of the brown or yellow races. Instead, the Supreme Court ruled that to be considered white, one must be also considered Caucasian, which the Japanese were not. Caucasian, as stated by the courts, was based on scientific knowledge and thus set the precedents for future cases. It was with this ruling that the Japanese were legally barred from naturalization into America and all of the benefits that were included with citizenship. Though this ruling was overturned when fined, an Indian War veteran was denied citizenship based on the idea that Caucasians did not equal white because of his skin color, it still did not allow the Japanese the rights to naturalize. The decision made by the court cases presented by Ozawa further increased the prejudice against the Japanese and gave the United States the legal grounds on which to prevent further immigration of the Japanese into the United States. American fear of the Japanese had grown to an all-time high, and finally, the Americans were able to find peace in knowing that there was no longer a way for the Japanese to immigrate into the United States, creating a less heightened risk of expansion.